When you hear something like the Wills Act, it's easy for your mind to just glaze over. You picture stacks of complicated legal paperwork, right? But let's try to look at it a different way. Think of it more like a personal rule book. It's designed with just one goal in mind, to make sure your final wishes are protected and followed exactly the way you want them to be. So let me ask you a question, straight up. Are you 100% certain your will is legally valid? It's a scary thought, and it's a fear a lot of people have, and for a really good reason. A single tiny mistake, something you could easily overlook, could have huge consequences down the line for the people you care about most. And honestly, the stakes couldn't be higher. One little error can actually invalidate the entire document, leaving your legacy and your family's future in a state of chaos. But here's the good news. The key to getting it right is understanding South Africa's Wills Act, and that's exactly what we're going to break down right now. All right, so first things first, why do wills get rejected in the first place? Well, it almost always boils down to just one thing, not following the specific legal steps, what the law calls formalities. Let's take a closer look at what those are. You can think of it like this. The law has a checklist of what I like to call golden rules. Now, these aren't just suggestions, okay? They're very strict requirements. And if you miss even one of these rules, the master of the High Court, that's the official who processes all wills, is pretty much forced to reject the whole thing. So let's get practical. What are these golden rules we keep talking about? This is really the heart of it, the stuff that makes a will legally sound. And it all centers around something called the signing ceremony. And the process here has to be incredibly precise. So, step one, the testator, that's you, has to sign at the very, very end of the will. And if it's more than one page, you have to put your initials on every single other page. But here's the part that's absolutely crucial. Two witnesses have to physically watch you sign it. Then, right then and there, they have to sign the last page in your presence and in the presence of each other. Everybody has to be in the same room at the same time for that whole signing process. So who can be a witness? Well, the rules for that are pretty simple. They just have to be at least 14 years old, and they have to be competent, meaning they understand what's going on. And remember that really important rule about being present together during the signing? That applies to them just as much as it does to you. Now, there is a special rule for those situations where the testator can't write and instead signs with a mark, like a thumbprint or an X. In that case, you need a commissioner of oaths to be there. This is an official, like an attorney or a police captain, who verifies the person's identity and attaches a special certificate. It just adds an extra layer of security to the whole process. Okay, so let's say you've made your will and you've followed all the rules perfectly. Great. But, life happens, things change, and your will needs to be able to change with it. So how do you legally change it without having to start over from scratch? Let's dive into the options. You've basically got two main choices. The first is an amendment. That's a direct change right on the original document, like literally crossing out a name and writing in a new one. The second option is a codicil. A codicil is kind of like a legal PS or an add-on. It's a completely new, separate document that modifies the original will, so you don't have to rewrite the whole shebang. Now, this is a big one. You can't just scribble a change in the margin and call it a day. Any change at all, no matter how small it seems, is a formal legal act, and it has to be treated like one. And that brings us to what we can call the re-signing rule. If you make an amendment directly on the will, you and your two witnesses have to sign or initial right there next to the change. And if you create a codicil, that separate PS document, it needs its own complete signing ceremony, following the exact same golden rules as the original will. The bottom line is, every single change needs that same formal treatment. So, what happens if, after all this, a genuine mistake still slips through? Well, this is where the law actually has a pretty surprising and kind of fascinating fallback plan. Just imagine this scenario for a second. You did everything you thought was right, but maybe one of your witnesses got called away before they could sign. Or maybe you just forgot to initial page 2. Does that mean the entire will is automatically thrown out? Is there just no hope? Well, before we get to the answer, it's really important to remember this. The safety net we're about to talk about, it is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's a last resort, not a substitute, for just getting things right from the very start. This is called the rescue provision. Section 2(3) of the Wills Act gives the High Court the power to overlook a technical mistake. If the court can be completely satisfied,
based on evidence that the person who passed away truly intended for that flawed document to be their final will, it can order the master to accept it as valid anyway. The key word here is intent. And proving that intent usually means going to court, which, as you can imagine, is a really expensive and time-consuming process for your family. So while this provision is there for genuine accidents, trying to rely on it is a very costly gamble. Whew! Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. So to make sure all of this really sticks, let's just boil it all down into one final, simple checklist.
So let's just run through the key takeaways one last time. For a valid will, it is all about that signing ceremony. You and two witnesses sign the last page, and you initial all the other pages. Simple as that. Any change you make, whether it's an amendment on the document itself or a separate codicil, needs its very own fully witnessed signing. And don't forget, Section 2.3 is the court's emergency rescue power. It's a last resort that is all about proving what you truly intended. And that really brings us to our final thought, your legacy. Your final instructions to the world, it's all written down in ink. So after everything we've talked about today, maybe it's time to pull out that document and just ask yourself, are all the signatures in all the right places?